Amara had never expected. One moment she was inside her family home. The next she was standing on the wet, muddy driveway, rain pouring over her head as if the heavens themselves were punishing her. Her parents and her cousin Ifunanya had turned on her, their voices sharp, their words cutting deeper than the rain that soaked her clothes. Neighbors peeked through gates and windows, some whispering, some staring openly, and Amara felt her face burn with embarrassment. She had always thought her family would protect her, but today that trust was shattered. The storm didn't just soak her clothes. It seemed to mirror the storm inside her chest. Confusion twisted with anger and hurt as she tried to understand why this was happening. Ifunanya, who had always seemed just a little too competitive, smiled cruelly, watching Amara shiver and struggle under the weight of the rain and humiliation. Every drop that fell felt like a reminder of the betrayal, every gust of wind a reflection of the chaos she felt inside. Amara took a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. She couldn't stay there, standing like a victim in front of everyone. But even as the cold and wet pressed down on her, a small, fierce spark lit inside her. She didn't know exactly how yet, but she knew this wasn't the end. Somehow, she would rise from this stronger, smarter, and ready to show everyone that she was not someone to be underestimated. The rain might have drenched her body, but it couldn't touch the determination growing inside her. Amara stumbled through the rain, water dripping from her hair and clothes, until she reached a small cafe a few blocks away. She pushed open the door, and the warmth hit her immediately, a sharp contrast to the cold storm outside. The smell of coffee and baked goods wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. She sank into a corner seat, shivering slightly, and let herself breathe for the first time since her family had thrown her out. The cafe was quiet, just the soft hum of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine, but to Amara, it felt like a safe little world where she could think. As she sipped a steaming cup of tea, her mind began to clear. The humiliation, the shock, the anger, they were all still there, swirling like the storm outside, but beneath it, a different feeling was starting to grow, clarity. She thought about the years she had spent quietly building her life, saving every little bit she could, investing in small projects, and planning for a day when she could stand on her own. No one had believed in her, and that had only made her more determined. All those sacrifices, all that careful planning, were pieces of a puzzle she was finally ready to complete. Amara began to smile, just a little, the kind of smile that came from knowing she held power that no one else could take away. She didn't need to scream or lash out. She didn't need to beg for respect or prove herself to anyone just yet. What she needed was patience, strategy, and timing. Slowly, she began to sketch out her plan in her mind. It wouldn't be obvious. It wouldn't be loud. It would be subtle, quiet, yet devastatingly effective. She pictured the look on Ifunanya's face when she realized Amara had succeeded without anyone's help, when it became clear that she had been wrong to underestimate. The thought made her pulse quicken, not with anger this time, but with excitement. The storm outside tapped against the windows, relentless and loud, but inside Amara felt calm, focused, almost like the rain was pushing her forward, washing away the fear and doubt. By the time her tea was finished, Amara had a clear vision. She knew the steps she would take, the moves she would make. Every small act, every decision would be precise, deliberate, and unstoppable. She didn't need anyone to help her, and she certainly didn't need anyone to cheer her on. This was her moment, her chance to turn betrayal into triumph. And as the storm raged outside, Amara leaned back in her chair, feeling for the first time in hours the quiet, powerful thrill of a plan coming together. Amara stepped out of the cafe, and the rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, the city lights reflecting off the wet streets like 1,000 tiny mirrors. She pulled her coat tighter around her, but there was no shiver this time, only a quiet confidence. At the corner of the street, parked in the misty evening, was her car. Not just any car, but a sleek, silver luxury vehicle she had purchased months ago, fully with her own saving. No loans, no help from anyone, just her hard work and careful planning finally paying off. Seeing it now, shining in the dim streetlight, made her chest swell with pride. She stepped closer, opened the door, and ran her hand over the smooth hood. This car wasn't just a mode of transport, it was a symbol of independence, of everything she had worked toward while her family doubted her. She took out her phone and called her driver, someone she trusted completely, giving simple instructions. Pick her up and follow her lead. Within minutes, the engine purred, and the driver pulled up beside her, ready to take her wherever she wanted. As they drove through the slick Lagos streets, the city seemed quieter, almost holding its breath with her. Amara kept her eyes on the road ahead, not the physical road, but the one she had paved for herself through years of discipline, late nights, and careful choices. She thought about how her parents and Ifunanya had treated her, how they had thrown her out without a second thought, and she felt no anger now, only determination. The plan was simple but powerful. She would arrive at her old home on her own terms, unannounced and in control. No begging, no pleading, no apologies. She would show them exactly what they had underestimated, what they had ignored, and what they could never take from her independence, her success, and her dignity. The streets were misty, the car moving silently under the streetlight. Every turn brought her closer to her family home, and with every passing block, her confidence grew. She imagined the surprise on their faces when they saw her, not wet and humiliated like before, but composed, self-assured, and thriving. The balance of power was about to shift, and Amara felt an electric thrill at the thought. By the time the familiar gates of her old home appeared in the distance, Amara was ready. She wasn't just returning, she was arriving. And this time, nothing could catch her off guard. The rain, the betrayal, the humiliation, they were all behind her. What lay ahead was hers to control, and she knew that once she stepped out of that car, the story would change forever. Amara's car glided silently through the wet streets of Lagos, droplets running down its polished silver surface like liquid glass. She had arrived at the familiar street, the kind where every neighbor knew everyone else's business. The gates of her old family home came into view, and she slowed, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves, now mixed with excitement. The rain had eased into a fine mist, giving the evening a soft, mysterious glow. As she drove closer, a few neighbors noticed the unexpected sight. Whispers started immediately. "Is that Amara?" one woman asked, pointing from her balcony. "She looks different," another murmured, eyes wide. People began leaning out of windows and stepping onto doorsteps, drawn by curiosity and the rare sight of something extraordinary in their ordinary street. For the first time in years, Amara felt the weight of attention, and she welcomed it. At the house, her parents were inside, relaxing after what they thought was a successful humiliation of their daughter. Ifeanyi sat smugly, imagining Amara shivering in the rain somewhere, defeated. That smugness vanished the moment the car lights illuminated the driveway. Their eyes widened in disbelief as they saw the sleek vehicle glistening in the mist. And then her, Amara, calm, composed, and drenched no longer, but fully in control. The shift in the air was immediate. The arrogance that had once dominated the house now seemed fragile, trembling against the reality standing before them. Amara didn't rush in or yell. She simply sat in her car for a moment, letting the image sink in, letting the murmurs of the neighbors outside amplify the moment. Every second her parents and Ifeanyi processed the scene. Every moment they struggled to reconcile the confident woman before them with the girl they had dismissed, reinforced her quiet triumph. She opened the car door with deliberate calm, stepping out so the rain misted around her like a halo. Every neighbor who had gathered to watch caught the sight of her poised stance, the polished car, the unspoken power she now carried. No words had been exchanged yet, but the message was clear. Amara had returned, not as someone vulnerable, but as someone unstoppable. Even from inside the house, her parents could feel it, their authority, once unquestioned, cracking against her presence. Ifeanyi's lips pressed into a tight line, trying to mask shock, but it didn't work. Amara had arrived on her terms, the balance of power unmistakably shifted, and the world outside the gates had already begun to note. This wasn't just a return, it was the start of a reckoning, one that Amara was ready to command with quiet confidence. Amara stepped into the house, water dripping from her coat and hair, but she moved with a calm confidence that made it clear she was in control. The familiar walls, once comforting, now felt like a stage for what she had come to do. Her parents froze for a moment, shocked to see her standing there, not broken or defeated, but composed and determined. Ifeanyi's eyes narrowed, her smirk faltering as she realized this was not the scared girl she had thrown out earlier. Amara didn't rush to speak. She let the silence hang for a moment, letting her presence make its point. Then, with a steady voice, she began to outline her achievement. She spoke of her business projects, the investments she had made over the years, and the careful savings that had allowed her to buy her car and plan for her independence. Each word landed with quiet weight, dismantling the assumptions her family had held about her. She made it clear that she no longer depended on anyone for financial support or validation. Every accomplishment was a brick in the wall of her independence, and she wanted them to see it. Ifeanyi tried to interrupt, throwing out sharp insults and cutting remarks, hoping to unsettle her. But Amara stayed calm, letting the words pass over her like water off a shield. She didn't need to fight back with anger. Her calm confidence was enough to silence every attempt at mockery. The more Ifeanyi spoke, the smaller her words seemed against Amara's steady presence. Each insult highlighted not Amara's weakness, but her strength, her patience, and the power she had cultivated quietly while they underestimated. Her parents exchanged uneasy glances, their shock deepening as they realized how little control they actually had over her life now. Amara didn't raise her voice, she didn't plead, she simply stated the facts. She was capable, she was successful, and she was free from their authority. The contrast between her composed determination and their flustered arrogance made the room feel tense, electric, and completely turned upside down. Amara paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Every detail, every carefully shared accomplishment was proof that she had built herself up without their help, without their recognition, and certainly without their approval. She had not come to seek revenge and anger. She had come to show that she was untouchable in her independence. The storm that had raged outside earlier had nothing on the quiet, undeniable force she now represented inside those walls. By the time she finished, Ifeanyi was speechless, her smirk gone, replaced with frustration and disbelief. Her parents, usually so commanding, were reduced to stunned silence, forced to acknowledge the undeniable truth. Amara had grown into her own person, and nothing they could do would take that away. In that room, soaked and composed, Amara had reclaimed her power, proving that strength did not come from loud confrontation but from quiet, unwavering confidence. By the time Amara stepped back outside, her confrontation inside the house had already begun to ripple through the street. The rain had slowed to a fine mist, and curious neighbors had gathered along the sidewalks, peeking from balconies and windows, whispering to one another. Her car gleamed under the streetlights, polished and impressive, a symbol of everything she had achieved on her own. People couldn't stop staring, their conversations full of surprise and admiration. "Is that really Amara?" one neighbor asked, eyes wide. "She looks amazing. And that car," another said, nodding toward the sleek silver vehicle. The murmurs grew louder, weaving together into a single, undeniable story. This was the girl everyone had dismissed, the one her family had humiliated, standing tall and shining. The visual of her arriving in style, calm and powerful, was more than just a display of wealth. It was a statement. She didn't need to shout or fight. The message was clear. Amara had succeeded on her own terms, and everyone could see it. Rumors began to spread quickly down the street. By the time people returned home or spoke to friends and family, the story had already grown. Amara made it on her own. She's thriving, and she didn't need them at all. Her independence became a topic of fascination, a source of inspiration. Everyone who had once thought of her as helpless or dependent was now forced to reconsider. Not because she said it, but because she had shown it. Even those who hadn't seen the confrontation inside the house felt the impact. The car, the poise, the quiet confidence she carried. Everything about her presence was proof that she was no longer the girl pushed around by her family. She didn't just arrive. She announced her independence without a single boast, letting the reality speak for itself. People in the neighborhood started telling their friends, and soon the story wasn't just about a car or a girl returning. It was about resilience, strength, and the power of building yourself from the ground up. Amara noticed the way heads turned, the whispers that trailed behind her steps. It wasn't enough to have succeeded quietly before. Now the world around her had to witness it. She smiled faintly, enjoying the subtle thrill of watching her family's assumptions crumble publicly. The crowd's attention wasn't about envy. It was respect, admiration, and a sense of awe. Every glance, every murmur confirmed what she had already known. She was in control, unstoppable, and no longer defined by the people who had once tried to humiliate her. That night, as the mist and lights danced off her car and the street hummed with whispers of her success, Amara realized something important. This was bigger than her own pride. It was a reminder to everyone watching that true power came from self-belief, preparation, and the courage to rise quietly while others doubted. She had reclaimed her narrative, and now everyone could see it. Amara returned to the house the next day, calm and composed, carrying with her a folder thick with proof of everything she had achieved on her own. Her parents and Ifeanyi didn't know what to expect this time. When she opened the folder and began showing them her documents, the tension in the room was immediate. There were pay stubs, bank statements, investment records, and certificates from the business projects she had started over the years. Every piece of paper was a reminder that she had built her life with hard work and determination, not handouts or family support. Her parents' faces went pale as they looked at the evidence. Each document made it harder for them to cling to the image of Amara as a dependent child. They shifted in their seats, eyes darting nervously from one proof to another, trying to find a flaw, some reason to dismiss her success. But there was none. Everything was clear, organized, and undeniable. Their arrogance, the same arrogance that had allowed them to throw her out during the storm, was crashing against the reality of her achievements. Ifeanyi tried to scoff at the folder at first, attempting to undermine the evidence with sarcastic comments. But even her words sounded hollow compared to the tangible proof in Amara's hand. The confidence in Amara's voice, the steady way she explained her ventures and investments, made it impossible for anyone to argue. Slowly, the sneers faded, replaced with uneasy silence. Ajoa, her cousin, stared at the papers, her smug attitude unraveling. For the first time, she seemed to see Amara not as someone to push around, but as a person who had quietly, steadily, and successfully carved out her own. Guilt flickered in her eyes, mixed with shock and regret. The realization hit hard. She had tried to humiliate someone who never needed anyone's permission to succeed, someone who had quietly outgrown the people who tried to hold her back. Amara didn't raise her voice or gloat. She let the documents speak for themselves, allowing her achievements to tell the story. Every investment, every pay stub, every project was proof that she had never been powerless. Her parents' silence grew heavier with each passing moment, and Ifunanya's attempts to mask her humiliation fell flat. Ajoa's turning point was clear, her laughter gone, replaced by a somber awareness of how wrong she had been. By the time Amara closed the folder, the room was filled with a quiet, heavy understanding. The family could no longer deny the truth. Amara had succeeded without them, thrived without their support, and shown them that independence wasn't just possible. It was inevitable when someone was determined enough. The storm of betrayal that had once shaken her now seemed distant. In its place was quiet triumph, undeniable proof, and the satisfaction of knowing that her family's shock was complete and deserved. Amara decided it was time to share her story beyond the walls of her family home. She invited a few close friends and respected members of the community to a small gathering at her favorite cafe. Word had already begun to spread about her return, her car, and the quiet power she carried. So when people arrived, they were curious to hear directly from her. Amara didn't speak with anger or bitterness. Instead, she told her story clearly, calmly, and with honesty. How she had been humiliated, thrown out in the rain, and underestimated by those closest to her, and how she had quietly worked for years to build her own life. Her friends listened intently, nodding and smiling in admiration. Community members who had known her family for years were visibly impressed, seeing firsthand the contrast between the girl they had once pitied and the woman who now stood before. They asked questions about her business projects, her investments, and how she had managed to achieve so much on her own. Amara answered each question with a gentle confidence, her poise only reinforcing the story she was telling. It became clear that this was not just a tale of revenge. It was a story of resilience, determination, and self-reliance. Outside the gathering, word of Amara's story spread like wildfire. Neighbors who had witnessed her confrontation the day before began sharing the details with friends and family, adding their own observations of her calm confidence and the impressive car that had become a symbol of her independence. The attempt by her family to shame her backfired completely. Instead of gossip and embarrassment, people expressed admiration and support. Everyone could see that Amara had taken control of her life and her image, and no amount of family interference could change that. As the day turned to evening, more people came forward to offer congratulations, to ask for advice, or simply to tell her how inspired they felt. Amara realized that her story had grown bigger than she imagined. It wasn't just about proving her family wrong anymore. It had become a lesson for the community, a reminder that hard work and self-belief could overcome even the most personal forms of betrayal. By the time she left the cafe, Amara felt a deep sense of empowerment. The humiliation she had once carried no longer mattered. She was in control of her narrative, and the public support surrounding her only strengthened her sense of independence. People now saw her not as a girl who had been cast out, but as a woman who had risen above it all, thriving despite the attempts to hold her back. Her family's arrogance had met a wall they couldn't break, and Amara had emerged fully in command of her life, her story, and her image. The tension in the house was thick when Amara walked in that evening, calm and poised. Ifunanya, sensing one last chance to assert dominance, opened her mouth with a sharp remark, her tone dripping with arrogance. "So, you think showing off a few papers and a car makes you better than us?" she sneered, trying to provoke anger or embarrassment. But Amara didn't flinch. She had expected this. She had prepared for this. Instead of responding with anger, Amara calmly set down a folder on the table. She opened it to reveal even more evidence of her independence. New contracts she had signed, updated business statements, and records of community projects she had led successfully. Her voice was steady, clear, and confident as she walked them through each achievement, showing that her life was thriving entirely on her own merit. Every detail she shared cut through the room's tension, leaving no room for insult or mockery to take hold. Her parents watched in stunned silence, their faces betraying the shock they could no longer hide. For years, they had held authority in the home as unquestioned. But now, every document, every word Amara calmly presented, challenged that authority and overshadowed it. The power dynamics had shifted completely, and they could not ignore it. Ifunanya's attempts at ridicule began to crumble under the weight of facts, her frustration obvious. She had no comeback for someone who had prepared and executed their life with such precision. Amara's poise remained unshaken throughout the confrontation. She didn't need to raise her voice or belittle anyone to assert her strength. The room seemed to acknowledge it. Her composure, her accomplishments, and her quiet authority spoke louder than any argument could. Every glance exchanged between her parents and Iphigenia reflected their recognition of the truth they had ignored for far too long. When she finally closed the folder and gathered her things, there was no need for dramatic gestures or harsh words. With a serene, almost effortless grace, Amara turned and walked toward the door. Every step she took symbolized her independence, her ability to leave a situation on her terms. She didn't need to shout a victory. The room itself, heavy with the realization of her success, celebrated it silently. As she opened the door and stepped out into the cool evening air, Amara felt the weight of the confrontation lift. The storm of emotions, the insults, the humiliation, all of it had been transformed into proof of her strength and determination. Leaving the room gracefully, she demonstrated that true power didn't come from cruelty or anger, but from control, preparation, and the quiet confidence to stand tall even when others tried to tear you down. In that moment, the confrontation ended, not with a fight, but with a statement. Amara had won, fully and unmistakably, and she had done it on her own terms. Amara slid into her sleek silver car, the leather warm beneath her hands, and started the engine. Outside, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, sparkling under the streetlights, washing the streets clean as if the city itself were marking a new beginning. Behind her, the house she once called home stood silent. Her parents and Iphigenia lingered at the doorway, soaked, stunned, and full of regret. Their attempts to control her, to belittle her, had all crumbled, leaving only the quiet weight of their own mistakes. As she drove away, Amara felt an incredible lightness, a sense of freedom that went beyond the relief of leaving her family's harsh words behind. The rain hitting the windshield mirrored her own cleansing, a fresh start, a life built on her own terms. Every drop seemed to carry away the past humiliation, the doubts, and the fear she had once carried. She was no longer just a girl fighting for respect. She was a woman who had claimed her independence, who had proven her strength, and who now moved forward without looking back. Neighbors watched from doorways and windows as the car disappeared into the misty night, whispering to one another about Amara's courage and success. Her story had become larger than herself, inspiring those around her and rewriting the narrative her family had tried to control. The shift in power was clear, undeniable, and irreversible. In that moment, with the city lights reflecting off the rain-slicked streets and the engine humming beneath her, Amara felt triumphant. She was free, empowered, and fully in command of her life. The past could not touch her, and the future was hers to shape. She had risen above betrayal, humiliation, and doubt, leaving behind not only a soaked, regretful family but also a powerful statement. Amara had arrived unstoppable, independent, and celebrated by those who had once doubted her.